Michelle with Noah's Ark Investments, and I wanted to continue an earlier video and talk about how to get a resource efficient home if you're upgrading or building new or purchasing a already built home through new construction. There are some things that you can request through your build process. So to get started, the first topic I want to cover is when is it time to replace something? So there's these huge fixes that we have to do in our house, whether we need to replace it or fix it, but when is it time to just actually replace it? And I'm going to then explain to you why you should replace it with an energy efficient model as opposed to conventional. If you have a home furnace and it's an old coal burner or it has an exhaust fan or a natural draft which controls the flow of gases, that's a good indication to replace it. Those are older models. Also, if you have one that has a continuous pilot light and does not use electric ignition, that's another time to replace. Necessarily, if you're having frequent repairs and it's constantly needing to be checked up on or repaired or monitored, then that's another good time to replace. If your heating bills are increasing substantially, then there may be a problem with your heater. Another thing that you should notice and look for is if there's hot and cold spots in rooms. And finally, if heating your home takes up 45% of your bill, definitely an indication to replace it. So the next one to cover is air conditioning units and when to replace those. So first indication is something that you can visually see. If you see the refrigerant leaking at the bottom or there's some kind of puddling, then that's a good time to say that that's not working anymore. Also, if it feels warm or humid indoors, not really working very well. It's not exchanging the air properly. If it's noisy when operating, and if the electricity costs are substantially increasing, even with regular use, if you're not changing the degrees too much, you're not changing your standard use by too much, then if it's continuing to increase on your bill, it would be a good time to change it because it's losing its wearability. The next one to look at is water heater and when to replace that. So typically they last about 10 years. So the age of equipment is the first indication. If you're getting close to that 10-year mark, it's about time to replace it. You're going to want the most efficient water heater. If you're having rusty water and you're seeing like an orange or brownish murky water coming through your faucets, then that's another time. If there's rumbling noises, and if there's no hot water coming out, I think you should replace it. That one's obvious. Another big thing to notice are windows and doors. So with the windows and doors, there are some visual things that you can see, and then there's some that you have to feel. So you might only be able to feel those certain things during season changes. Air leakage, if you're noticing that you're standing by a window and you're feeling air come in, cool air come in, or if you're noticing that your cold air from the air conditioning is not staying inside, there may be an air leakage. Also, if it's cold near windows, if you're feeling chillier just sitting by the window, then you might want to replace them. If there's condensation that you notice between layers of glass, that shows an issue with the exchange as well, and that there could be some leaking. Also, rooting sills and frames. So if your sills and frames are rotting around the edges, or if there's water penetration around the frame, or there's a gap. If you notice any gaps in the sills and frames, then you might just need to weather strip and add insulation around that part of the window. But if you're having single pane windows and you're feeling cold near the window, that's a obvious indicator that you could upgrade, and you could go to double pane, low E windows, and I'll talk about those soon too. So now we're into my next topic. How do you make these big changes energy efficient? One of the big ones for the home furnace or air conditioner, after you've decided that it's time to replace, this is my favorite one. It's called an HRV system, which is a heat recovery ventilation, and it constantly exchanges air from the outside with the inside air. The oxygen is constantly replenished, and it passes over some ventilation system that connects the outside of the house to the inside of the house. So when the air from outside passes over that, it warms it as it enters your house, or vice versa if it's leaving your house. Keeps the home at a pretty steady temperature, internal temperature, which is another great thing too. You don't have huge fluctuations with weather changes. It does an exchange of air between the intake and an exhaust. The next similar system to this is ERV, which maintains an even humidity level by transferring the humidity from drier interior air and vents it to the outside. There's a few more that you can consider for your air conditioning concerns. One being a whole house fan. And what a whole house fan does is it pulses air through the windows and vents. It's typically found in the attic or could be in the roof if you don't have an attic. And it supplies 30 to 40 air changes in an hour. It's pretty great. Natural ventilation. Obviously, this one's easily achievable. If you're not having major issues with your windows and doors where there's air leakage, then natural ventilation is a good one too. What it does is that breezes combined with the chimney effect by moving air to keep the air inside fresh and cool. This one's a little more difficult and it's better for new builds, but it can still be done on an existing home. It just takes a lot of engineering and it's the most expensive upgrade that you could do. A geothermal system. So a geothermal system typically installs pumps underground in the earth's crust, and the pipes, what they do is they run through the ground, up into your home, up to this unit, the geothermal system, and it exchanges by heating and cooling, which is provided by the temperature underground. It's a little confusing, but there's different systems, and this is like a whole video I could get into. There's closed loop systems and open loop systems, so we'll revisit this one. Water heater, when you're considering replacing with the energy efficient model, there are a few options, one being the on-demand water circulation pump. And this one rapidly moves water from a water heater to the fixtures. It saves water by reducing time that you're waiting at the faucet. Then there's a tankless water system, which produces hot water on demand. If you've ever been to Europe, they use this a lot out there, and you have to turn it on yourself. So you flick the switch, the water heater turns on, a light indicates when it's heated up or not, and then you have hot water. So whatever water is stored in that tank is what you're going to be using. There's no energy used to maintain heated water in a tank, and it's situated closer to the faucet. So another one is the tankless coil indirect, similar to the tankless water system. And this coil heater uses the main heater as a heat source, and then the heated water is stored in a side tank. Solar water heating uses, obviously, the sun. So the solar water, you have receivers that sit on your roof, on the ground, somewhere that they're getting a lot of sunlight regularly, and then it's directly pumped through collectors on the roof, through pipes, typically like rubber piping, and they're just coiled, and the pump circulates the water between the tank and the collector. The transfer of heat in the collector tubes goes straight to the tank, and then the indirect pump system uses an antifreeze solution to circulate through the collector. Heat exchanger transfers the heat then in the collector tubes to the tank water. So it's kind of like a constant flow, but that's the way that it keeps it's hot. Windows and doors. So when you're replacing the windows and doors, and you've decided, okay, these windows are old, I don't want them anymore, I'm ready to stop having air leaking out of my house or cold air leaking in, there are a few things that you can do. You can look for windows that have a low U factor, which is a rate of heat loss. You'll want to look for the windows that market lower solar heat gain coefficient, and this measures how well the product blocks heat from the sun. Also, windows with a rating with a lower air leakage, it's AL is the acronym. Double pane windows, of course, triple pane windows, and then finally low E windows, which uses a microscopically coated thin layer of metal oxide on the window. And this is helpful for if you've ever had problems because you get a lot of sun through your windows and a lot of heat coming in. It might fade your carpets, pillows, drapes, things like that because you're getting so much sun in. So this is like that extra layer. It's kind of like a tint that blocks it out. It reduces the infrared radiation transfer. So these are some fixes that I was mentioning just as big replacements that you can do in your house. But by big replacement, I don't mean expensive. If you're going to replace your water heater system, air conditioner, home furnace, and you're already going to replace it because it's at one of those points that I mentioned earlier, it might not be much more expensive. These systems may be marketed to be really expensive and people in their minds think that they are, but when in fact they are not.